Hi, this is Greg Hughes from CloudWire. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about File Transfer Protocol, also called FTP. And if that sounds technical, well, that's because it kind of is. But it's not complicated. It's a good idea to know how FTP works and how to transfer files to and from your server. Also, it's a good idea to know how to look at the files on your server in case you need to fix something or troubleshoot. Now, you may never need to use FTP, especially if you're building your website with something like WordPress. But again, it's a good idea to know that it's there, and it's a good idea to know how to get in just in case. So we're going to talk about that. In order to use FTP, you need an FTP application. Obviously, you would have a hosting account, a website, and a domain already set up. And in the case of most hosting companies, and certainly CloudWire, you always get FTP access with your hosting account. But to use it, we'll need a special application. There are several of them, many of them free. Some of them cost money, but you usually don't need to buy an FTP application. A popular one is FileZilla, and you'll probably find a lot of videos about FileZilla. But my favorite FTP application, which has been my favorite for the last 20 years as a web host, is one called WinSkip. I find it easy to work with and easy to set up and just very intuitive. So in this video, I'm going to show you where to get WinSkip and how to set it up. First of all, you just need to go to this website, winskip.net, and download the application. It's very easy to do, and you can get information and instructions on that from the folks at WinSkip. And of course, like I said, there are other FTP programs. If you're using a Mac, you'll have to use something else. I don't know that there's a Mac version of WinSkip, but there are programs such as CyberDuck and other things you can Google, but FTP programs all work the same. The interface may look a little bit different, but it's simple enough to where they all work exactly the same. Once you've downloaded the WinSkip application, you can start using it, of course. So I'm going to open up mine. In my case, I happen to be managing a number of websites, and so they're listed on one side of the screen here. But when you first open WinSkip, you probably won't see a list of these. You will see this thing that says New Site, a place where you can actually create what's called a session or a connection. The good news is you only have to do this once. Once you set up your FTP connection to your web hosting account, you can have WinSkip save it so that you don't have to do this every time. Also, it's simple to do anyway. Here's how you do it. Since we're using FTP, we want to select that protocol. And then we're going to type in the host name. Now, you can either use ftp.whatever your domain is.com, or I prefer to use the IP address. And the reason for that is technically connecting through the IP address is a little bit faster and cleaner. But you can use either one, ftp.yourdomain.com or the IP address that you've been assigned. Your host provides you with that, and you can see it in cPanel. You're always going to use port 21 for FTP, so that's easy. And then, of course, your username and password. Now, all web hosts, or at least most of them, provide you with FTP access, and your username and password should match your cPanel username and password. So it's really easy to remember. So whatever your cPanel login was, it'll work for FTP. That's certainly true for CloudWire. So this is where we're going to put the username and the password, the same ones we use to log into our cPanel. And then all you do is save this session. Once you do that, it'll be listed here so that the next time you want to connect, you just simply select it, it appears, and then you click Log In. So let's do that. I'm going to log into this web hosting account through FTP. And there we are. If you looked at the File Manager video, you may recognize this series of directories and files. This is what it looks like inside your web hosting account. And again, we're at the top level. This is the area above your website. Remember, your website is always stored inside the public HTML folder. So when you FTP into the server, you're looking at what you might call the root directory. You almost never want to go into any of these or mess with them unless you really know what you're doing. There are some ways to troubleshoot with these, but in most cases, even if you do use FTP, you're almost always going to go into the public HTML folder because that's where your website is. That's the public part, in other words, of your hosting account. You would never want to delete this folder because that would require the hosting company to reset your hosting account because that erases your entire website. But let's go inside, and to do that, we just double click. And in this case, I've already got a website here. In this particular hosting account, I'm using a WordPress website, so we see the typical WordPress files here. But what WinSkip or any FTP application allows me to do is to move files between the server and my computer, which is actually represented on this side of the screen. So this pane, this window pane, is local, and this one is considered remote. We can just literally move files between these two places. That may seem overly simplistic right now, but there's times when that's very, very convenient to do. If you ever need to grab a file from your server or put one on it, this is how you do it. Putting your file on your server, that's called uploading. Taking a file from the server and putting it on your local computer, that's called downloading. And it's that simple. So if I wanted to upload a file or a directory to this account from my local computer, this is how I do it. I'm going to move this one called clubs. I'm going to drag the folder onto this pane and let go. It's going to tell me before it does it, this is where you're putting it inside the public HTML. Is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. And then it'll move it. And depending on how big that folder and its contents is, it'll run for a few minutes, a few seconds, or whatever it takes. So you can see I'm uploading a folder. Now, the great thing about FTP applications for troubleshooting is they tell you when things have happened on your server. If you ever upload a file or a web page to your server and you can't see it on the website, you can always FTP into the server and see if it's really there. So I can go in here and see, well, I really did put a folder on this website called Clubs, and here's when I did it. This is the actual day I did it and even the timestamp. I can go inside and look at the files inside this as well and make sure that I really put them on my server. There's some really handy tools with an FTP application because not only can you see these statistics, but you can actually right-click on files and deal with them as well. I could literally edit this HTML file if I wanted to. I click on Edit or do it with Notepad, and I could edit the HTML. Again, you'd only want to do that if you know what you're doing, but the point is you have access to these files literally on the server. And any changes that I make, they'd be live because we're working on the server itself. I can also navigate back up a level. You can see right now we're inside a folder called Clubs, which is inside the public HTML. That's the path. If I double click on this, it means go back up a level. And now we're back inside the public HTML where my website should be stored. Also, it's possible to delete files from here. And again, you want to be careful with that, but I know I want to delete this, so I'm going to do that. I can either just select it and click the delete button, or I could right click on it, delete. You'll notice I can also rename files. Very important thing to know how to do. Sometimes that's necessary. I've seen people actually name their files incorrectly and have to go in and rename them. For example, sometimes people accidentally name their index page this, capital I index. And your index page can't have a capital I in it, just as a side note. So they'll look at their website and say, something's wrong, my home page isn't showing, and it's because of that error. Well, FTP allows you to come in and fix things like that. You can come in and rename that and simply change that to what it should be and make a simple fix. Again, we can delete things, which I'll do here. We can upload and we can download. And that's that. That's FTP. Now, FTP is managed in your cPanel, but you really don't need to do anything in cPanel to use your basic FTP account. Your default FTP account is always, like I said, your cPanel access. But let's say you wanted to create an FTP account for someone else to go into your hosting account, say your web designer or somebody that works with you. Well, you can do that. Let's go into cPanel and I'll show you how. Here I'm logging into cPanel. And we're going to go down to where we can manage our FTP accounts right under Files. So it makes sense that it's under the Files because that's why you have a file transfer protocol. So we'll click on here and you'll notice if we scroll down, we already have this account, the one we just used. This was the username I used, WebTalk, and it gave me FTP access to everything in the home directory, everything in home, WebTalk, and then everything below that, which you would only want to have access to if you're the owner of the website. If you wanted to give somebody else FTP access, but you wanted to control where they could go, in other words, you wouldn't want them maybe to go above the public HTML, or maybe you just want them to go into a very specific folder inside the public HTML. Well, you can do that in here. You can actually create an FTP login for someone. You wouldn't necessarily give them yours. And here's how you do that. You'd simply create the login right here where it says add FTP account. So if I had somebody working for me named Jeff, I could give him an FTP account, and his login is going to be jeff@thedomain.com. It's not the same as yours. Yours doesn't have an @ You have the default sort of master FTP admin. But the person you assign it to, their FTP login is going to look like an email address. It's not an email address. It's just the syntax for a sub account for FTP. Then you're going to give them some kind of password, and you're going to want to give them a better one than I just did because that one's not very strong. And you're going to do that again. They need to match. And then I can decide the directory that I want Jeff to access. Inside the home directory, which is WebTalk, and then below that might be, the 24/7 WebTalk directory or the public HTML. And then maybe I've created a folder called Jeff just for him. Well, setting up this path here is what does that. That means Jeff is only going to be able to log in through FTP, and he will land inside this folder. He won't be able to go above that folder. And so while this may be a rare thing to do, it's really a convenient thing to do if you need to give FTP access to a very specific area of your web hosting account to someone. And this is how you do it. So FTP, File Transfer Protocol, as complex as it sounds, it's really actually simple once you've got it set up. It's a really handy way to manage your files in your web hosting account with CloudWire.